Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I want to thank Senator Joni Ernst for being here with me and welcome everybody on behalf of myself and her for attending this Ukraine briefing, the war in Ukraine, and talk about its impact on food insecurity and world hunger. Before I do that, I want to make sure we introduce everybody here at the table with me. I'll go down to my far left, and this is Dr. John Newton. He's the Chief Economist for the Republican Senate Ag Committee. Dr. Newton is in charge of fact-checking me and make sure I don't miss anything or say anything wrong. We appreciate his staff helping us prepare for this event. Dr. Hannah Hopko is here to my left, and Daria Kaliniuk is here to our right, and Maria Berlinska as well. Three Ukrainians that are here representing the Ukrainian civil society leaders, and Senator Ernst and I had the pleasure of meeting them several weeks ago in Poland as well, and I'm sure she'll get into that. This is day number 42 of Putin's unprovoked war that caused unspeakable suffering in Ukraine, and it's brewing a perfect storm in the Black Sea. If this war doesn't end soon, we'll reach a point of no return. And food insecurity will engulf the globe. World hunger will be the pandemic of 2023 and 2024. Senator Ernst and I are here today to warn everyone that where today there's food insecurity, tomorrow there can be famine. In fact, I think the stage is set for a possible another Arab Spring. It's important that all Americans understand we'll not be immune for this impending food insecurity plague. Americans and all citizens of the world will see empty grocery shelves and undoubtedly feel the sting when they check out at the cash register. Today I'm going to do my best to paint the big picture. Senator Ernst, I think, will go to the next level, and our guest will dot the I's and cross the T's. But let me tell you about this perfect storm that's brewing. The Black Sea is the gateway of a land flowing truly with milk and honey. It has food sources that supply the rest of the world. If you look at our map behind us, you see Ukraine and all the great nations surrounding the Black Sea and how very much they are so important to the food chain of helping the world. And I think it's important as you look just not where these products are grown and made, but where the wind trades take these products to. The Middle East, Africa, and the Far East. Right now, Ukrainian farmers should be planting corn and sunflowers and soybeans, but instead they're having to turn their plows into weapons. The USDA has told us that there's almost 100 million people that are having food insecurity right now. 900 million people, almost a billion. A billion people around the world have food insecurity right now. And about 30% of those are in Africa and 40% in Asia. Again, this is where the trade winds blow, the food, the riches of Ukraine and those surrounding the Black Sea to supply them for food. And every day this war continues puts us closer to a hunger pandemic and famine. And the world's going to feel these ripples. This storm is going to cause ripples across the world. Let me tell you about the rest of this perfect storm. It's just not the war in Ukraine. There's drought across the world. We've supplied a map with you all discussing where this drought is. Significant drought in different layers from mild to moderate to severe. There's civil unrest and wars across the world as well. It's not just in Ukraine. And there's a COVID hangover that's more greatly impacting poorer countries that are already engulfed in the economic consequences of COVID and already suffering inflated prices. And these even higher food prices will spell catastrophe. And again, I think of the Arab Spring and that setting that's occurring right now, that if something doesn't change soon, the world will have many more challenges ahead of us. Back here at home and in other agriculture powerhouses across the world, we're all seeing the impacts of high input costs. The 4 F's, fuel, fertilizer, feed, and finance. Maybe we'll have time to talk about those a little bit more later on today, but the cost of fuel, fertilizer, and pesticides for that matter, the feed for our cattle in Kansas, cattle in Iowa, hogs in Kansas, those prices are going up, driving up the cost at the grocery store as well. And I hope we get a chance to talk about finances. I think about Joni in Great Bend, America, we have a co-op. And this summer, June and July, my farmers will be harvesting wheat. And they're going to bring those crops to the co-op in Great Bend, America. And you've got co-ops like this, I bet, every 30 miles along the train.
Even more.
And what we're going to see is rather than buying $5 bushel wheat, those co-ops are having to finance $10 or $12 bushel wheat, corn in the fall as well. And then those co-ops hang on to this food, the corn, the wheat for 30 days, 60 days, a year, again borrowing money at higher interest rates as well. Our farmers having to borrow money, whether it be for tractors or for fertilizers. Finance is a big issue right now for American agriculture and everybody across the world. I think that those are the highlights, and that's the big picture of what I want to talk about. And I'll just take a moment here and turn it over to Senator Ernst and get her comments on the situation as well.
And thank you, Senator Marshall. It is really wonderful to be able to have this opportunity to share some thoughts on the situation that we are facing, and with war in Ukraine and the greater impacts of not just loss of lives, but loss of livelihoods, and of course the global impacts to this impending crisis. And for our visitors here today, thank you very much. Coming from Ukraine and really visiting with us on this world stage about not only the impact the war is having on their own lives, on their communities, but what it could do to those of us involved in agriculture here in the United States and around the world. Just a quick overview. There are about 400 million people, including the Middle East and Africa, that are dependent upon Ukraine and Russia for their food. At least 14 African countries import half of their wheat, including Egypt, the world's largest wheat importer from Ukraine and Russia. Russia has effectively shut down the Black Sea for exports because no carriers will take the risk of shipping in an active war where multiple cargo ships have been damaged by missiles. Ukraine's railways are struggling. They have a backlog on the country's western border as traders are looking for alternative routes for their exports. During this planting season, production will drop about 40 to 45% in Ukraine due to the availability of fertilizer, pesticides, and diesel fuel, something that's not talked about often enough, because that diesel fuel is being used by their military right now to fight the war. Russia is using food as what we call a quiet weapon, and they are targeting agriculture. The high fertilizer prices and shortages will have a very hard impact on developing countries where farmers can't afford it and will have reduced yields. Their cash-strapped governments will be forced to import large quantities of staple crops. The World Food Program Executive Director David Beasley says the impact is like nothing since World War II. And this is what struck me, this quote. And he said he's having to take food from people who are hungry and give it to those that are starving. That means we're facing very dire circumstances. The best and quickest way to address the food security crisis is for Ukraine to win the war. That is an absolute must. And they can win. And I know they can win. These women that are here with us today know they can win if the United States and if NATO properly equips them to win the war. So again, I want to thank our guests, and Senator Marshall, thank you for convening this forum today. I'm just going to say one final thing, that in 1989, I had a small role in an agricultural exchange that took me into Ukraine. And the family that I stayed with on that collective farm that engaged in farming activities, that family opened not only their home, but their hearts to me and the other Iowa students that were visiting. And they were a freedom-loving people then, and we know that they are freedom-loving people today. So I wish my best to my friends in Ukraine, and that we are able, Roger, to do everything we can to assist them in winning this war. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Senator Ernst had a question for Daria to start with.
I do. So, Daria, we're gonna, oh, it's right over here. Oh, for Maria, I'm sorry, we did change it. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, so we're gonna start with Daria today with the questions. Maria, excuse me. I am going to get this straight. I'm looking straight at it. Maria, and thank you very much. And your background, I want you to first share your background and then answer the question, what do you need to win this war so that Ukrainian farmers can get back to feeding and fueling the world? Again, to you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, I'm a war veteran, and since 2014, and I spent almost 3 years at the Donbas area as a drone operator, as a specialist of air reconnaissance. Now I can see all battles of field of battles. I can see all the situation from the sky, and now I see a lot of burning fields, agriculture fields. You know, my grandma and grandpas, they spent almost all their lives to grow weeds, to grow food. And as of now, we can see a lot of evidence that we have less and less fields, and we have less and less opportunities to have this food. And returning to a question, Senator, I don't know what do we need as Ukraine to win this war. But I know what do we need as partners. Because Putin clearly says it's holy war, Russia against the US. It's not war, Russia against Ukraine. It's not like a regional conflict, you know? It's very naive to think it's a regional conflict. He clearly says, we would like to beat America. And Ukrainians punished as friends of American people. Because we have common values. We have a lot of common things. For example, when I grew up, I listened a lot of American music. From American Pie to, you know, Deep Purple and so on. Hemingway and Salinger, Mark Twain, King, my lovely writers. So it's very naive to think that if Putin will take us, he will stop 5 nuclear plants, a lot of food supplies, a lot of resources, a lot of rivers, ports, airports. What he will do with all these sources? He will use these resources to attack again and again Western world. And Ukraine, as a part of this Western world, attacked first. But it's not, it's only start of this war. That's why I'm asking to stop this war while it's in Ukraine. And you know, some people said, answering me, what about China? China not support Putin officially, but officially. China is already in war. You know how? By technologies and intelligence. I have video I can show you. When we are using Chinese drones, radio stations, even cell phones, They are precisely shooting us. They sharing our location with Russians. And that's why it's war between, as of me, I'm not politician. I don't understand full scale and full picture of this chess game, a geopolitical game. But what do I know for sure? As a soldier, they will use our resources to attack Western world, China and Russia, these totalitarian regimes, against our open societies, against our values, against our democracies, against free people. So, Russian propaganda changed. And I have mentioned to Senator Marshall that Russian propaganda changed during past 8 days more than past 8 years. Before that, they said that here good Ukrainians, but Nazis among Ukrainians, and we would like to eliminate these bad Nazis. And as of now, they said we have to kill all Ukrainians. Doesn't matter. Elderly, children, doctors, teachers, Christians, Muslims, color of skin, doesn't matter. Do you think it's war crimes? No. I saw a lot of horrible things. I saw a lot of war crimes in Donbas area. It's not war crimes. It's not simple war crimes. It's total genocide. It's total genocide of all nations. Only because we choose to be with America. We choose to be with Western civilization. And last but not least, we have brave soldiers as of now. You know, some experts said that we will lose in 3 days. 41 day. 42nd, as of now. Ukrainian society united as never. And all we need is weapon. As a soldier, I don't ask you about boots on the ground, because I don't like American girls and boys be wounded and died. I don't like any like a type of deployment for American soldiers. But what do we need?
Maria, if we could just stop just for a second. We're going to come back to that. I promise.
The last postscriptum, if I can, on behalf of all my brothers and sisters in arms, I guarantee we will beat Putin. We will beat Putin, and we will save all free people of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And I know that Senator Ernst and I will have some comments, and we've met privately, and we mourn the loss of your brother. Your brother was recently a civilian that was murdered by Putin's army as well. And thoughts and prayers to you and your family, your fellow soldiers. And I know that we want to circle back to some of those issues. If you'll forgive me, though, I want to turn back to agriculture just for a second and ask Dr. Hopko a question. Ukraine grows 10% of the world's wheat exports, 15% of the world's corn exports, and 50% of the sunflowers. The #2 producer of honey and the best cookies I've got to eat in a while anyway. So we look forward to trying these this evening. We also know that your husband works for Cargill, an American-based family company with presence in Kansas, in Iowa. And obviously the shelling that's occurring has impacted one of the Cargill plants. How has this war impacted the infrastructure overall, and specifically the agriculture infrastructure?
Thank you, Senator Marshall, Senator Ernst, for having us today and to allow us to tell the world about Russian aggression against Western civilization and how it creates global food crisis. You are right saying that Ukraine's contribution is equivalent to feeding about 400 million people, not counting Ukrainian population. So every second to third piece of bread, they are produced from Ukrainian wheat in Africa and Middle East. So this is really important. You are right that we are #1 sunflower oil production. And by the way, one of the factory of American company you mentioned, so the factory was in Donetsk. And after Russian military aggression in 2014, what they did, they destroyed $18 million investment. So this is how Russians, they brought destruction, devastation, and actually they're destroying not just investment, they're destroying people's life. So this is why today when we are talking about also important, this is what I brought from Vinnytsia region. This is small company, small family business. They produce these hearts, these cookies, and also honey, and like also asking, Hannah, could you please bring us to Ukrainian armed forces more weapons, more military assistance that we could return back to feed the world, because this is really important. And I told, okay, and this is like with love, and they wrote here, the time of Ukraine is come and the victory will be coming. So we are here just to show that victory is coming to Ukraine. And thanks for having given us access to the Congress, because actually what we prepared a PowerPoint presentation and we have videos how now farmers are taking out some artillery and rockets from the fields. So actually you could share, and also presentations about food and general price inflation. You were right mentioning famine, and actually about kids which will be suffering in Africa. And you know the story of Ukraine, survival in the last century during the 2 world wars, and actually when Stalin organized the artificial hunger, famine, genocide against Ukrainians. We were known as a bread basket of Europe, of the world. And this was the way of punishment from Stalin regime to kill all Ukrainian nation. What Putin is doing now, because all this cult of Stalin within 22 years of Putin's leadership. So this is why everything what you've seen in Bucha, all these war crimes, all these dead bodies of women, families, how they burned, raped women, and even kids, girls, 11 years old, raped. So this is like, because this culture of genocide from Stalin to Putin hasn't disappeared. So this is why victory of Ukraine is important for food security, but the most important to tell the world that Ukraine is a spiritual basket of the Europe, because the fighting spirit of Ukrainian armed forces, the fighting spirit of our territorial defense and our nation are so high. So we came here because we believe in God. And in Bible, in Matthew 7:7, it's written, knock the door, and the door will be open to you. So we came, and thanks to both senators, that they opened their doors for us. But we want American leadership, a president, your National Security Council in particular, who don't understand, and not mentioning genocide which is happening now. So what we need to know, so world will face starvation, hunger riots, refugee migration without Ukrainian food supply. And there is no sufficient alternative to cover this. This is why we need to faster way to win this war. And actually another important reason, and I hope your State Secretary during his visit to Europe, he will convince European partners, NATO partners, to do more for us, unblocking of Ukrainian seaports. It's a key for world food security. Action to be taken urgently. International pressure on Russia, more sanctions, tougher sanctions, escalation of the problem via major food buyers, China, Turkey, Egypt, embargo and blockade of Russian sea exports, and also provision of powerful anti-ship weapons to Ukraine. And of course, support by US Navy and Royal Navy UK to clear Black Sea from mines and minesweepers. So this is really important, because when everybody is saying that they take care about Ukraine, so we need actions now, because within these 40 days, of course, it's great to hear that Putin is a war criminal, But it's not enough for Ukrainian armed forces, which are now in eastern Ukraine, in Donbass, in Kherson regions. So this we have to protect the Black Sea, we have to protect Ukrainian nation, and give us, as Churchill said, give us the tools and we will do the job. So this is what we need, and thanks to senators for supporting us. But within the next 2 weeks, this is very important because Russian army is very demoralized. So we, within these 42 days, we demonstrated how we are defending our nation, how we, Ukrainian armed forces, is a real and true European armed forces. And we don't understand why Polish fighter jets are not in Ukraine yet. So all these people from Vinnytsia who are now thinking how to plant, the planting season is at risk. So they are asking, please bring us more military assistance. Bring our army, ammunition, tanks, fighter jets, anti-tank missiles, and even to switch off Russia from GPS, because they are using GPS and this excess of navigation when they are rockets using this system to destroy farmers, attack maternity and children hospitals, military base, fuel storages. So why we are like praying, begging you to help? Because we don't want people in Africa, in Middle East, to not just suffer, to face famine and just 6 months ago ahead of us. So we survived in last century, and even genocide of Stalin that hasn't resulted in like destroying the nation. What is Putin now planning? He wants to destroy Ukrainian as a nation. So we came here as asking you, like God's brothers and sisters, we're all together. Please help us to win this war. So thank you for all of you, and then we will feed the world with the best agriculture products and all these hearts which are now in Ukraine beating for love, because compared to current Russia, which is country of rape, of devastation, so we bring to the world food, we bring also bravery, and also what we bring is defending democracy, which is really important to say here. All presentations, all materials, all data, statistics you have, and thanks to Senator's team. You have a very great team who are organized and all these presentations.
Thank you, Dr. Hopko. I think Senator Ernst has another question.
And this one for Daria. So thank you so very much. And this is a great discussion. I am so appreciative of the input that we're receiving today. So Daria, how is Russia using food and agriculture as a weapon? We've seen a number of reports that they've targeted infrastructure, railways, obviously the ports, as we just heard. Can you talk a little bit about what's actually happening on the ground? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Thank you, Senator Marshall, for being here. And, you know, the death from hunger is a very painful death. I've learned that when I was a student at school, and we were studying the history books about the famine, the artificial hunger organized by Russia back in 1932-1933 at the territory of Ukraine. 10 million people died because of hunger. I also learned that from my grandmother. She's still alive, she's 87 years old. And she went through the World War II. She was a kid when Nazis came, and she remembers how she would go to the fields and collect rotten, frozen potatoes. And then her mother, my grandmother, would try to cook something out of these potatoes. Since then, she has her own small farm. She plants potatoes, a load of potatoes. I never can't understand why, but she tells me, you have to have always a load of food in your storage. And this winter, she again had a load of potatoes in her storage. Why? because she understands what is hunger and that the war can come. And this year the war came. And she was wise woman. She is wise woman. She is lucky because she is in the region, which is Zhytomyr region, it's 130 kilometers from Kiev. But it is not Bucha, it is not Irpin. She still can go to her small farm and plant the seeds. She will not move anywhere. I wanted to evacuate her. She told, well, I was born here, I survived Nazis, I will survive Russians. I don't care. But I want to emphasize, hunger is a tool Russians are using for decades. And now, when we are talking here about the possibility of the world hunger, there are people in Ukraine dying from hunger, starving, in the bomb shelters, under the rubbles, in Mariupol, in Kharkiv, in Kherson, in Chernihiv. And there is no way to deliver humanitarian aid to them. There is no way to deliver food to them because, you know why? The Russians are shelling with missiles all humanitarian convoys, all infrastructure and ability to deliver food for hundreds of thousands of people. We don't know how many people already died from hunger. But we know that if we will not receive weapons to protect our sky from Russian missiles, there could be millions. In Ukraine first. And then, as Ukrainian farmers are not planting, but collecting, harvesting missiles from the fields, there could be hunger all across the world. There could be a lot of instability. Ukrainian ports are blocked by Russian ships for more than a month. It means that all Russian ships, commercial and military, have to be blocked from all ports across the world. I can't understand why it was not done. Only military ships were blocked. But why we can't make sure that all Russian ships, beneficially owned by Russian companies, are blocked from all ports across the Western democracies? I can't understand that. And I also cannot understand why it takes so slow to deliver aid to Ukraine, to deliver weapons to Ukraine, to deliver fuel to Ukraine. If we will not get fuel in the coming days, Ukrainian farmers won't have anything to park, to get fuel to their tractors and to plant Ukrainian fields. Fuel reserves in Ukraine were deliberately hit by Russians. Oil reserves were deliberately hit by Russians. All corridors, logistical chains were deliberately hit. We have to stop them. The only way to stop Russia is to get weapons we need as soon as possible. There is no way out of that if we will not receive this weapon. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. So thank you, Daria. My next question is for Dr. Newton, then we'll open it up to the press. Dr. Newton, as we all know, wheat accounts for about 50% of the calories across the world. In Kansas right now, significant drought. Less than a third of our crop is in a good or excellent condition. What do you see worldwide happening as far as world economics and food economics? How is it going to affect food security around the world, from Ukraine to all this perfect storm that I've been describing?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'll be very brief. As you mentioned, the U.S. wheat crop is in the worst condition that we've ever seen. 30% of the wheat crop is in good to excellent condition, so that's going to impact our capacity to export wheat and deliver wheat around the world. As we've heard here today, the ability for our friends in Ukraine to plant a crop this spring and export a crop is going to be severely limited. So at a time when food prices are already record high, I think it's going to only make food insecurity a worse situation for us to deal with moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Newton. And now we'd like to open it up to our press that's here in person. We have some folks back home. Any questions, anybody? Or comments?
We just heard, Emily Buck from RFGTV. We just heard Daria mention there's a need for fuel in Ukraine. We also have American farmers facing record high fuel prices, which threaten their own production. what solutions are you looking for to help not only make fuel affordable here in America, but also perhaps options for fuel exports?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. And we have heard this time and time again with the skyrocketing fuel prices, energy costs across the United States. It is to unleash American energy, not to be reliant upon Russia, who has invaded a sovereign country, but to rely on our own energy resources. The administration tends to turn away from American innovation and energy and focus on, okay, if not Russia, then maybe we can lift sanctions on Iranian oil. Maybe we can turn to Venezuela for our oil. We have oil right here in the United States. But a solution that I've also proposed, of course, is to allow for more biofuels to enter into the market. Certainly, we would like to see E15 year-round. I have a bill that has been co-sponsored by a number of my fellow senators that would allow E15 year-round, would provide additional dollars going to infrastructure for those retailers. We have biodiesel, we have ethanol. We can provide and backfill for the loss of Russian oil imports today. We can do it today if we turn to biofuels. All the administration has to do is say, let's do it.
Emily, let me just add something. Thank you for being here. Thank you for FDTVs for still providing wholesome family entertainment. It's nice to see somebody still cares about families out there as well. But what I hear from farmers back home and from traditional energy producers back home is they feel like this administration has declared war on them. Whether it's the EPA limiting herbicides and pesticides or limiting the permitting for new oil wells, new gas wells, it's the same theme going across here. The price of fuel is on the back of Joe Biden, that his policies have created. It's been well documented, whether it's decreasing supply by shutting down the Keystone Pipeline or stopping drilling offshore. We talk about financing. Again, my oil folks back home that have been in this business for decades before I was born cannot get financing to go drill more oil wells, and the EPA won't permit them to go forward as well. This administration has been very, very disingenuous. You can't talk about the price of energy without talking about the price of fertilizer. Nitrogen is made from natural gas. We take the hydrogen out of the natural gas, combine it with nitrogen from the atmosphere, and then we heat it with natural gas as well. So if natural gas is doubled, in this case nitrogen fertilizer is quadrupled as well. So really this is about policies. And the price of fuel was up way high, way before day number 42 of Putin's war here as well. So the administration could definitely help us, but it won't happen overnight. And then the biofuels, let me just put an exclamation mark on that. Not only would we be using 10 or 20% less traditional oil, it would cut our tailpipe emissions in half, and that's what this administration says they're in favor of. They want to decrease tailpipe emissions. E15 would cut it in half, higher blends would cut it in half again. It's technology we have today. We don't have to build out more infrastructure. We better get back to Ukraine here. So, yeah. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
Obviously, Kelly Ferris with Fox News. Thank you all for being here. Obviously, the United States and Congress have passed legislation that will allow more money, more military equipment to go to Ukraine in previous days. We saw some of the videos. You've explained some of the damage that's been done to some of the farmland that's in Ukraine. So, can you explain? Hopefully that this war ends quickly and Ukrainians can resume their lives. But what will be needed? Will Ukraine need additional assistance to allow for those farms to resume production and for exports again? Like, can you give an estimate as to what Ukrainians will need?
Thank you for the question. First of all, we are very thankful for that bill. It's 13.6 or 8 billion bill.
All those javelins and stingers.
So she said it's mostly javelins and stingers.
It's mostly javelins and stingers, but still important, absolutely not enough. We try to calculate how much out of 13.6 billion went actually to Ukraine for weapon. It's less than 10%. And this is the most we need. About 2 billion is actually the cost of weapon which the United States provided to Ukraine this year. To run this war against the second largest army in the world, which overnumbers us a couple of times, we need much more money. And out of 30.6 billion, just 10%, where did other money go? To reinforce NATO, 3 billion. There is 3.5 billion which goes to the replenishment of their warehouses, to buy replacement of those Stingers and javelins which we have received. So it's actually goes to the United States. Again, I understand that you used your warehouses, you have to supply them again. And then another half, 6 billion or something like that, goes merely to humanitarian aid, but it goes not to Ukraine. It goes not to feed people who are now in desperate situation, dying from hunger, or dead and are already in collective graves. This aid goes to international organizations with huge bureaucracy who are not starting even to work in Ukraine, and they will not go and deliver this aid to the most dangerous places. But there are organizations in Ukraine, local organizations, which have mobilized, local businesses which have mobilized, and they are delivering aid for free. These are volunteers. If they will not get support, this system of delivering aid inside Ukraine will collapse in the coming weeks. So this policy has to be changed. We shouldn't take care only, but honestly, I want to be very honest with you. I don't want everyone to be focused just on refugees, Ukrainian refugees outside of Ukraine. They are safe. They will not die of hunger. We need to focus on millions and millions of Ukrainians who are inside Ukraine. And a little bit, policy has to be changed. And the budget per weapon has to be not 2 billion. We need at least $10 billion to fund our security and protect us. Russia will not stop. I want this war to finish quickly, but I'm afraid that it's a long story.
I would like to add just a few words.
Sorry, we do a couple more questions and we'll come back, but I want to make sure we get you out on time as well. Senator Ernst, I think you have someone from Iowa maybe?
Yes, I do. Hello, do we have David Geiger on? And David is with Iowa Agribusiness. Are you on, David? Yes. Go ahead, David.
Trying to get you, David.
We can have him type a question in and do it.
Right.
another
Yeah,
one.
if you could, David, if you can type a question in even, it's not. Okay, David, there you go. Do you mind reading it back there?
He's asking, thank you so much for your time. I've heard estimates that farmers will not be able to plant somewhere around 25% of their land, but for that other 75%, farming is already a dangerous job. Could you comment on the impact of those producers trying to get crops in the ground in the midst of combat, whether it is bombs, mines, or firefights, and if the U.S. plans to support that process?
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David, for this important question. And if we are talking about spring planting campaign 2022, so Ukraine is going to plant no more than 14 million hectares, 70% of spring crops area in 2022. Biggest loss in north is East and South Ukraine, and farmers plan to seed less corn, more soybean and sunflower. And actually what is really also important to know that Ukraine is redirected exports flow to western border with EU countries via railway stations and tracks to the EU, Baltic and Black Sea ports. But Russians might also change their tactics and start now bombing railway station in Ukraine, not to how they blocked ports, not to allow us to transport via sea, and now they could destroy our railway. So actually, no export, no money, no further crops. So, and new crop will have no ability storage because they are destroying all storages now, and we will need millions of dollars to rebuild destroyed agriculture infrastructure. And we are here also in Washington talking about Marshall Plan for Ukraine, or new Ukraine plan after victory comes, and we will need to rebuild Ukraine, and agriculture is also one of the key sector of Ukraine. So, and also what is really important to know that seaports are blocked, Danube ports are insufficient, and commercial vessels are under attack of Russia. And another problem is sea mines are deployed. So they are not mining a field where we are planting agriculture products, but also sea. And this is why we demanded, like, remember when Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, we've seen at that time 6th Fleet of the US. Now we don't understand why US as a security guarantor to Ukraine, when we give up third largest nuclear power in the world, why there is no NATO countries helping us to protect the Black Sea region security, because Russia continued to militarize occupied Crimea, and also through Crimea to send more tanks and lethal weapons to Ukraine, Kherson region, south of Ukraine.
Sean, is there any questions from back home?
Yes, there's one from Haley.
From Haley?
Does the United States have enough wheat production to make up for the global shortage?
And this will be the last question.
Okay, John, you want to help me with that? John Newton, does U.S. have enough wheat to make up for the shortage?
Well, I think a lot of that remains unknown. We talked earlier about how 30% of the wheat crop is in good to excellent condition. That's a historically low number for this time of the year. So we'll see how our winter wheat crop continues to develop throughout the remainder of this year. Our spring harvest is underway, so we don't know yet what our yields are going to be this year, but certainly around the world there are grains, oil seeds, and vegetable oils in storage. I think the challenge, and that we've heard here today, is how do we transport those products to people in need? What is the price of that product going to be, which is going to further drive inflationary pressure higher? So the short answer to that question is there's a lot of uncertainty, Senator.
So I think there's no way we can. Our ports are already maxed out. It is a bad report for a wheat crop this year. We can't make up for 15% of the world's exports in Kansas. American farmers are incredible. I know that they'll do everything we can to do. With these type of input prices, it'll be next to impossible, and that's why I keep describing this perfect storm. Senator Ernst, any final, thank you for the question too. Any final thoughts?
No, I just think that if we continue to stress how important it is that the United States continue to partner with Ukraine and our NATO allies, that maybe leadership here will step up to that expectation, that we will continue to be good partners to those that have been good partners to us. So I am so thankful that we've had the expert testimony coming from our visitors from Ukraine, and that we're able to stress to the rest of the United States and those that are watching around the world how difficult this crisis will be, not just for those that are struggling through this war, but also those that depend upon Ukraine for their feedstock and for their food. So thank you so much. Thank you, Roger, for being such a tremendous partner on these issues.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Again, thank you for your leadership, for leading our CODEL, for sharing your military experience, especially being a colonel that in war yourself. You give such a great perspective, and your understanding of being a leader and a voice for agriculture. Thank our guest again. And I just can't help but think of solutions. I want to focus on solutions right now. The obvious solution is to kick Putin out of Ukraine as soon as we can. Every day counts. And I think it's been well documented that we're not getting many weapons there, not nearly as much as we are being told that we are. Pretty much what I'm seeing, Senator, if you can correct me, is that maybe we're getting close to the Stingers and the Javelins, and most of the other requests have been left unnoticed. We're not implementing sanctions. I don't think we're implementing 10% of the sanctions that we could. We're talking about them, but we need action now. We can't keep delaying sanctions till the middle of June to go into effect. And I think a great example of what I'm talking about is the ruble pretty well has bounced back to its pre-war levels already. These sanctions are not working unless we implement them. We can't implement them on just the oligarchs. We have to implement them on their companies as well. We have to get the folks the weapons that they need to do their job. It's time for our president to show action. And I'll just close with this. Much is given, much is required. Ukraine has been blessed as a breadbasket of the world, and they've tried to provide for others. The United States, blessed in so many ways. We are the leader of the free world. But it's time we start acting like it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.